Okay. You should create an opening.
We would do this backwards. Why would we do it backwards?
I don't know. I think it's funny. I like it. Because then we'll put this shit in at the top.
Every time.
Every time. I love it. What's the episode number?
I think 1842. We might as well just do 1842.
All right. It's your turn this time.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. And we're just talking, or I should say the Batman special or something, right? Like, or should we just be a comic talk?
I think just comic talk. Comic talk.
Then we don't.
Comic talk take 2, or I don't know, comic talk we're back or whatever.
Continued. Yeah. This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1841. Comic talk.
42.
Some more.
42.
What? Oh, fuck. Yes.
This always happens.
I'm reading the thing off the website, and I'm just.
I know.
It's 1841 comic talk.
No.
From professionalism right out the window.
Yeah.
All right. This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1842, Comic Talk.
Is that an apocalypse up there? What the hell is that up there?
Yeah, it is. The Marvel Build-A-Figure. I actually need to clean it off and then eBay it because it's selling for $100. So
wow.
Yeah.
Yikes. So I got a funny email.
Oh yeah.
Congratulate Brian Deemer for 17 years at Comic Geek Speak LLP.
Yeah, on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I mean, I got that 2 days ago, but
I know. Can you believe it's been 17 years? 17 Peter, years. What the hell happened? I don't understand where time is weird.
I was 32. What were you? How old were you? 30, 31?
30. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's generations. That's a generation, right? Isn't that a generation?
Yeah. I mean, sure. If you got a kid, right? I mean, it's not.
People who think podcasting started 5 days ago.
I know, it's funny. You meet a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I have a podcast," or "I'm starting a podcast," or whatever, and then the conversation was like, "Oh, I have a podcast too. Oh, how long have you been doing it?" 17 years, and they're almost always aghast. It's like, "Oh, I thought my 6 months was a long time." And it's like, I know everybody has to start somewhere, but it's like then you think about it, and it's like, oh man, this is. People don't even think podcasting has been around for 17 years, let alone to be continuously doing one. It's pretty crazy.
Pod class of 2005.
Yeah.
So are you a Comixology guy?
Well, I do. I mean, I have the app. I don't use it super much, but what's funny is one of my, a guy who was on my team at my last job, we actually worked together at 2 different jobs. He left my team to go work at Amazon, and now he works on Comixology. So I've been texting him. I'm like, dude, you got this shit show. What's going on? He's like, oh man, everybody hates it.
We're gonna lay it on his shoulders. No, yeah. I wondered because I mean, speaking of podcasting, and Comixology is only how many years old, right? When did that start?
Probably a while now. I mean, it's got to be at least 10 years, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's what I mean. I figured it was something like that. But then I don't use it, but just everybody. And I thought Brian's got to have a thought about that. But just to know that somebody's actually working on it.
Well, it's, I mean, he just does what he's told, right? He's not making any design decisions, but it was definitely a case of, they needed to roll it under the Amazon umbrella fully. And they had a list of 100 features that it needed to have, and they had a deadline. And so they said, okay, well, we'll deliver these 50 features by the deadline, and then we'll worry about the other 50 features later. That's standard software development. That you either set a number of features that you want, or you set a deadline. You can't set both because you can never finish all the features by the deadline because time just doesn't work that way. Everything always takes longer than you think. So they, instead of just waiting until the product was done, they decided they wanted to get it out by a certain date. And so then,
and was it even like, why did they feel the need to even tinker with it in the first place? I mean,
because Amazon, they want it under. I'm sure under the hood, there's all kinds of connection with Amazon stuff and tracking stuff and ad stuff and all the stuff that they need to put in there that wasn't part of the Comixology thing. And when they bought them, and they hooked up the minimal amount they needed when they first bought them, and now their Amazon's like, no, now we need all the things. So they focused on the under the cover stuff, which is more important to Amazon corporate than the features that are important to the user, right? And there's not really competition, so people aren't going to stop using Comixology, and eventually the app will have all the features that it had before. It's just that it doesn't have it today.
Yeah.
And, it's just how corporate America works,
I see here July 2007.
Yeah, it's almost as old as us. There you go.
Well, that's just like Comic Book DB, right? Like they sold that and they said, oh, we're going to have a new thing in a year. And it's like, well, why don't you just let the thing that was there that was so user friendly? And, I think like in the last month or two, I saw somebody say something like, oh, shed a tear for Comic Book DB, because that was such
I loved that product so much.
Yeah.
It really. What was the name? Why can't I think of that dude's name?
Chris Cipher.
Something?
Chris Cipher.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah. That was awesome. He built something great.
Yeah. God, that was so. And we used it. I know I used it for years. So damn good. Oh, well. Do you want to jump in?
Sure.
To the meat right away. So we had this idea to pick something for the other person to read. We talked about it the last time we got together, and I remember sending an email, with a bunch of ideas, and then, we didn't get together. Now we got together, and we're like, well, let's do that Batman one. Everybody's Batman crazy right now.
Right.
Let's do this. And these aren't like, I didn't pick this for, this is the greatest Batman story. I just said, here's a cool Batman story that you may or may not like,
I never read it. So I
think it's a cool idea to, just like go, hey, what have and what haven't you read? And so I gave Bryan, the Batman Special #1 from 1984. And it's by Mike W. Barr, art by Michael Golden and Mike DiCarlo on inks. Todd Klein's letter, Adrian Roy, color. I mean, it's all the biggies of the 80s, some real big names. And it's called The Player on the Other Side. And it's really just about what the title says. It's an opposite, to Batman. Not in the way that Joker is the opposite. Like Joker's just like his main bad guy, but it's more like Superman has Bizarro and Flash has Reverse Flash. So they said, let's give Batman almost like a flip, a total flip of the character, Mike W. Barr. I should have sent you the text page. I realized I didn't send you that. There was a text page in the back that I should have sent to you, where he talks about Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty, the greatest counter villain ever, and he only was in what, like 2 stories, I think, of the original Sherlock Holmes stories, 1 or 2 stories. And he said and then he started talking about Ellery Queen, which I haven't read any of that. So
I haven't either.
Yeah. And he was like, that was like another impulse for writing this story. And just to give Batman an opposite, to just kind of put a lens up to Batman more than anything. So that was the one I picked. You read it. What'd you think?
It's weird. It was hard to sort of isolate the story from the larger Batman mythos, right? Because we've all read so much Batman and seen so much Batman and stuff. And so it was weird that like all of a sudden there was this other dude who was like, he came out of nowhere. Like you never heard of him for, the 40 years of Batman that existed before this story or whatever, 45 years. And now all of a sudden, just one day there's this guy who's like has all the same skills and knows all the stuff, and he like figures out who Batman is in like 20 pages, you know, and it's like, it's like, wait a minute, wait, like hold up, and then it's just over, and then he's dead and gone, and like you never hear from him again. So like it was a little peculiar from that perspective.
Sure.
But it was interesting, and I was, you know, trying to think back, like if I had read this in 1984, I probably would have been like, oh wow, whoa, you know, because it was shocking, you know, all the stuff. There was one weird thing. This is like a super like fan thing. So somewhere in this comic in the beginning, he says it's basically supposed to be 25 years after his parents were shot.
Right.
But then there's a line where it says, okay, it's Crime Alley. 25 years ago, this neighborhood was the dwelling place of the rich and soon to be rich, a place of gourmet restaurants and fashionable theaters. Except in every flashback ever, like they go into Crime Alley,
right?
And it was called Crime Alley when his parents were shot, not 25 years later. It wasn't like it was, I mean, the theater was nice, but then they took one turn and all of a sudden they're in a hellhole. And it's like, so that was like a weird trying to retcon that in and like change the origin story a little bit. But then you never hear about that again from in comics that I recall anyway. I don't, maybe it's mentioned, but
yeah, I think it's the opposite way. So this story also was like inspired by, it was Detective Comics 457, which came out in like the late 70s. I didn't write the year down. And in that story, which was by Denny O'Neil and Dick Giordano, it featured the first appearance of that character Leslie Tompkins that's in this that's in this comic, right? But it also apparently gave the name or made the name popular of Crime Alley. And the idea is that it was, you could kind of say, the murder of the Waynes is what precipitated Gotham to really go into like a downward.
Okay.
So it was called, what do they say? Park whatever.
Yeah, something. I forget. It's
because I even saw that too. I read that in the beginning. I was like, what? I thought
Park Row.
Park Row.
Yeah.
And then it gets named Crime Alley. And then what you're used to, when I was trying to put this together, is like, you know, go to the first Batman movie where it's exactly what you say. They walk out of the theater and everything's, you know, like Gotham's already a hellhole. I can't remember what Batman Year One was like. I don't know which way Frank Miller messed around with that. So pre-crisis, like pre-1985, Bronze Age 70s comics, early 80s, they still were, I guess, playing with the notion that Gotham used to be, and then part of this, I guess, this murder, and then all of a sudden, like, the crime bosses start moving in, like, and then just things start happening. So because it was really Batman's mission was really about the murder of his parents. But I guess a lot of times the focus is it's about that, but it's also about saving Gotham from itself, right? Like that seems to be like the big thing. I got to eliminate crime in Gotham. Right. Yeah. But, you know, originally it really just was the murder of my parents. Like, that's it. Like, and he just happens to be in Gotham, you know? So, because there was another thing too in the story where Alfred is like, where does Bruce Wayne go every June 26th?
Well, and that was the weirdest thing is like, he would obviously know that was the day that his parents were killed.
Right. Unless, and again, I was trying, because I started reading Batman in the 80s, so I don't know what happens before that. I'm not sure if in origin stories before Year One and before, you know, everything that we know, maybe Alfred wasn't the family's butler. He just was Bruce Wayne's butler. And
well, okay, but let's assume that that's true.
He still
you get hired for somebody to help around the house, and you know, like he's the most famous person, one of the most famous people in the country, and you find out that, you know that his parents were murdered. Right. The first thing you would do is Google when was his parents murdered. And even before Google, you could go to the library, like like the villain did in this, and look through old microfiche and find the newspaper and say, oh, his parents were murdered. Like that would be common knowledge that his parents were murdered, and the exact date wouldn't take long to find at all.
That was definitely a misstep for Mike W. Barr, who usually is like a really good writer. I mean, he wrote Batman and the Outsiders and wrote some Batman stuff. Like I really liked Mike W. Barr. So part of me wants to read that detective story because I want to see what they're trying to finagle in that. Like, how are they trying to it's Denny O'Neil. How did Denny O'Neil tell Batman's? I mean, his origin story is told so many ways and so many different times. So yeah, because I was like, wait, what? So I tried to put it in my head. Like, how could Alfred not know? Like that was just, and then even Commissioner Gordon, so what's funny about reading it now, like I did read this at the time. This was one of those comics that I read, like the local mom and pop store that I went to, because it was $1.25, it wasn't the normal standard price. They used to not put those on the newsstand. They used to put them in the back. So I would always have to ask, like, hey, do you have any of the more expensive books back there? So that's how I got it. And I did. I was like, oh my God, this character, so cool, the Wrath, never see him again, but it was such an interesting story. And it's definitely of an era where Batman is not the almighty Batman that we know later, right? Like if this was written in the 90s, he would have been like, oh, I know who that guy is. I'm going to take him out right away,
Right.
This is a Batman that got stabbed and beat and, just everything. He was punked. He was totally punked, which I kind of, miss those days. So I read it and I was just like, wow, this is just amazing. Then I read it again for this and I was like, oh yeah, this is very 80s, like it jumps a lot quickly, which I actually appreciated in some ways. Cause I was like, they give you this setup. Their both parents were killed on the same day, except one was killed by a criminal and then the other one was killed by Gordon, as a young rookie cop, so their trajectories go on totally different, but yet similar ways. And I was like, boom, boom, there's Batman, there's the Wrath. All right, now we're going to get them together. Like I appreciated that because this could have been a 12-issue series, nowadays.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
Would have stretched it out. So, but then I was like, now he already found, now they're already, he's over. I was like, wow, this kind of moves faster than I thought, than I remembered. So it lost a little bit of the luster that when I think back on it. And part of it was because now that I'm one of those readers where I dig in, I'm just like Alfred. So Alfred, first it was the Alfred thing. And then there's a scene where, so this character Wrath, for those people listening, he wants to go after Gordon now that Gordon is the commissioner and Batman has to stop him. There's been a couple attempts already. So Batman hides Gordon away. And then once Wrath finds out who Batman is, he attacks Alfred. And Gordon's like listening to the TV or whatever. And he's like, oh, Alfred got assaulted, that's a shame. I really don't want Alfred and Bruce to get involved. I'm like, you're Commissioner Gordon. Don't you go like, why would they be involved in this? Like, don't you?
Right.
I mean, I guess some of it is because Gordon doesn't know why this character is going after him. Like Batman purposely hid that from him at the end, right? He says, I fainted. What happened? And Batman's like, don't worry about it. Like he doesn't want Gordon to know that he's the reason why this character was even created in the first place. But still, I was like, Gordon, should that make your head scratch a little bit,
Well, I mean, if you start going down that path, then all secret identities are bullshit everywhere, right? Like,
it all falls apart.
Yeah.
But there were still a couple of things that worked. Like I liked that scene, and a lot of it has to do with Michael Golden. Like the even though it's for lack of a better word, reserved Michael Golden. I think it's not like Micronauts Michael Golden or Doctor Strange Michael Golden. It's really good artwork, but I love that scene where Batman goes into the Wrath's girlfriend's apartment and she thinks it's the villain because they have the same silhouette with the ears and the cape.
And it's like getting closer and closer.
Yeah. Like I could see a lot of these things if it was done for a movie or a short film or something like that. You know, I could see a lot of the high tension and the Batman or Bruce Wayne when the Wrath takes out his parents' tombstones. And then he's like calling to Alfred while he's driving like a madman. Like, get out the house, you know, like I could hear that. I could feel that. And I was like, that's cool. I do like that moment. I like that moment a lot.
I'll tell you what this artwork has to be, this has to be a massive influence for Todd McFarlane.
Oh.
So many of the faces, especially on the girlfriend, like the way her head is shaped and like her like shadows and stuff some of the time are so early McFarlane. Like when he was before, like his early Spider-Man McFarlane, before he became like the McFarlane that we know now, it was like he was still feeling himself out. And there were times if I didn't know this was Michael Golden and you said who drew this, I would have read through this and said, "Oh, this is early McFarlane." Like 100%.
Yeah,
I see it in so many faces.
I think some of that is the trajectory of, like the Image people were such fans of like Art Adams, and then I remember reading places where people. Whether Art Adams has said it in an interview or it's just been kind of like fandoms trying to trace the lineage of art. Like I've seen people say that Art Adams feels like Art Adams was inspired by Michael Golden. So like if you keep going back, I don't know who else you would go to, but so you got Michael Golden, Art Adams, the Image guys, like it feels like there's some kind of connectivity there. So I can totally see why you would say that. Yeah.
Well, I wonder, you know, the timeline. So like, when was that McFarlane did some Detective Comics or some special or something? Did he do that? Right.
I mean, he did, he finished Batman Year 2 because Alan Davis was supposed to do it.
Okay. And what year was that?
That was 86, 87. Yeah.
So that's like hardly any older than this issue, right? Like a couple years. And if that was some of his first professional work, you know, I don't know. It's just some of these faces on this woman are so like, I'm going to take a screenshot here and text this to you right now because like you just look at this and tell me that does not look like a McFarlane face.
So like some of his early work here, 1985, the beginning of 1985 with Coyote and then Infinity Inc. And then he hits Detective Comics. Oh, it's later. It's 1987. Detective Comics is 1987. Batman Year 2 Part 2. Also by Mike W. Barr. But it was like Infinity Inc. for a long time, whether it was from like issue 14, missing some issues, but then all the way up to like 36. And then Incredible Hulk. Amazing Spider-Man 298 in 1987. Wow, it's earlier than I remember. Looks like it's like Mary Jane almost, like later what Mary Jane would look like.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or the one image later of her where it's a close-up of her eyes, you know, and there's a lot of line work to it, right? Because Michael Golden there's realism in it in terms of how characters exist in the world that he wants to create, but it's still comic book cartooning when you look at Michael Golden. You know, it's not Alex Ross level. So, and that's what all those Image guys were, you know, it was all about the expression, less about reality and how many number of teeth you have in your mouth and things like that.
Yeah. I was at Brave New World on Saturday or Sunday, and they had the two omnibuy of the McFarlane's Amazing Spider-Man run and then his Spider-Man run.
Mm.
And I was just like, oh my God, I want to buy these and reread these. Like, I want to just revel in like that craziness that you're describing, where it's just pure design and you don't even care. It was just awesome.
Yeah.
I've definitely hit that age where I'm just like, oh, the stuff from my childhood is cooler than the stuff now. Even though like the art now is like so much better on so many levels, because people have just keep evolving and learning from the past, and like the bar gets higher and higher and higher. Yeah. But yeah, it's like you said, the comfort. Like, I know I'm gonna be 60 something and just be like, I don't even need to go to a comic shop. I'll just buy reprints of the old stuff and just keep rereading them.
Well, even in this story, like when they get to the fight scene at the end, because they only really have one confrontation, which I kind of like too. Raph gets Batman in a chokehold, stabs him, and then Batman like kias him and throws him over his shoulder into the fire, and he's burning or whatever. Michael Golden was just like, you know what? This is a great move. Batman stepping back, throwing him onto the thing, and it's all going to be a mess if I put the capes in it. I'm just going to take the capes out. Like, did you notice that? There's no capes.
Oh, I see him now. Yeah. Neither of them have a cape.
The capes are gone. Like, whether it was ripped off or not, there's no real clear thing. Or it was just Michael Golden saying, I want to do a flip. You just pretend the capes are there.
Yeah, because Batman has a cape like several panels before, and then the next page, his cape is just gone.
It's just gone. And you're like, okay, it's comics. Who cares?
Wow.
He could get away with it. He's Michael Golden. What are you going to do, right? But you didn't notice it, right? Like, you noticed.
I didn't even notice.
Right.
I didn't notice.
Like the visual language, you're so engrossed in the comics and reading it. You're like, it's Batman. Batman has a cape. Oh, wait. He doesn't have a cape there.
It was really fun, like seeing the old Batman colors again, like the gray with the brighter blue. Like, it just, again, it's comforting, right? It's just your childhood coming back to you.
I just talked about that, I forget, on Twitter or something, where, the whole, that's what comics was, right? Like, is he blue with black highlights or is he black with blue highlights, right? Like, you could look at it one or two ways. And I remembered that's what Byrne used to do. And I think what Steve Ditko wanted to do was Spider-Man. Spider-Man was really supposed to be black and red, but because of the way they print it out, you get the blue highlights and it just morphs to blue. But I can remember when Byrne was on Spider-Man, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, whatever it was, there would be times when he was flipping around at night and he would make his costume totally black, red with black, no blue anywhere. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. I could dig that. And it's kind of the same thing here with Batman. Like, I like the blue. It reminds me of reading comics back then.
Yeah, I wish making movies and TV wasn't so damn expensive all the time, because it would be sort of fun to like do a series where even for a few episodes it was wearing a different version of the costume, right?
Right. Well, it's funny, this character of Wrath, it makes me, when we're talking about like the colors of Batman, like in Morrison's JLA run, Howard Porter, the artist, and then John Dell, I forget who was the colorist. There were some times where Batman's costume was kind of brownish, almost like a bat, like a whether it was the highlight of the coloring of like the Justice League satellite or explosions or whatever. There are a couple times you look at it and you're like, he's brown. And I didn't mind it. Like, I was like, okay, makes it look a little weird, but I get it. But that character, if you remember that character Prometheus, that was like the anti-Batman in those Justice League stories, and he had like a helmet that he could put all of Batman's. He was sort of like Taskmaster, but he used to implement those abilities through like a CD-ROM or something like that. Yeah. And he was kind of like Morrison's versions of this character, of like the anti-Batman, the the total opposite of Batman. I think he even had like a similar origin story or whatever.
One thing that I noticed in the art, it's sort of similar to the constant changes in costume is Wayne Manor, and there's a couple panels. It looks more like the White House or like a Southern plantation than like a castle, which is what often it looks like. Well, like in the 60s TV or stately Wayne Manor, it looks like an English manor. Like this looks way more, like I said, like the White House, right? Big pillars and like other kind of construction, and that's just interesting. And then I got to thinking about how there's no like official schematics of Wayne Manor at DC headquarters that every Batman artist has to download and then replicate. It's like just draw whatever mansion you want, and then every single one is different, and the Bat Cave is always a little different, or whatever.
As long as it has the dinosaur and the big penny.
The penny, right. He doesn't even, and a bank of computer monitors.
Right.
We don't even care, right?
Yeah.
That really stood out to me because this is the only time I recall seeing Wayne Manor that looks sort of boring. I feel like he didn't really want to draw the building, and he was just like, let me draw people. So
and Bruce Wayne was like that too. He's very conservatively dressed when he's Bruce Wayne, right? Like when he goes to visit his parents' gravestones, and they're all knocked over, and he's in that like shirt with pockets, like almost like a safari shirt. I don't know what that
But he's got like a tie on.
Yeah.
It's like super weird. Yeah, it's like a short sleeve brown shirt with like epaulets, but then he's got a tie. Like, what is that? I don't even know.
Yeah, like this is
the 80s were weird, but
yeah, I mean, this was the era of he still was in smoking jackets and pipes when he was Bruce Wayne. Like he was just hanging out, like there's a Titans issue where I think it's New Teen Titans #1 where Dick Grayson, he and Bruce Wayne at that time are just totally at each other's necks because Dick Grayson left college and is trying to just be on his own. And he's walking out of the manor in his Robin costumes. Bruce Wayne's like, "Oh, do you need any help?" And he's sitting there in a like smoking jacket with a pipe, and Robin's like, "No, I'm good." And then I look at him like, "Yeah, they don't do Batman like that anymore, do they?" I mean, that goes all the way back from his first appearance too, when he was
because in the 30s, like rich men, that's what they did, and then it's like in the 80s, it doesn't make sense anymore, and certainly in 2022, it doesn't make any sense. Who the hell does that? I mean, even Hugh Hefner barely does that anymore. Like, I mean, come on, like what,
I did like in the 90s when DC did they got Anton Furst, the designer for the Tim Burton Batman movies, to design a Gotham City for the comics. So every Batman title at least did have like the same skyline and that same Gothic kind of feel to it. And that was cool. I did like that a lot because then it gave it it made it different than Metropolis, or any of the other cities. Even in this, there's that one scene in this issue. It's later in the book where Batman and Gordon are talking, but they're in silhouette and they're standing in front of windows, and you can see Gotham through the windows, and it just looks like a bunch of office buildings. There's no feel to it. And I like when Gotham has a feel to it, like the Burton movies, like they did in those Batman comics. When it's just sort of, here's the city, and it doesn't work. It doesn't really work for me.
No, I agree. That's one of I think that contributes to one of the reasons why I'm drawn to Batman more than Superman, because Gotham is often portrayed as this unusual, strange looking city that's different from every other, and Metropolis is just another city.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if people haven't read it, it's in a bunch of trades. I think it's in like a trade for Batman in the 80s. I saw somewhere there was a trade called The Wrath, something about The Wrath, because it includes later stories that apparently this character had a son or something like that. I haven't read those issues yet. And it is also on the DC app if anybody has the DC app, if they want to flip through it.
Sorry, I just sent another screen grab of Commissioner Gordon looking through the blinds, holding his fingers to and it also really reminds me of McFarlane, like a something that you would see in a Spider-Man comic. So
yeah,
I wish I could ask McFarlane about that right now and be like, how much were you influenced by Golden? I want to know.
Remember Buzz? Buzz talks about, that was the big thing, whatever the issue of that Doctor Strange issue where Buzz was like
65 or something, or 56 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. He said it was the most perfect comic book art, that was Michael Golden.
Yeah. I was, in the beginning, we were talking about how we've been doing this for so long now and time is weird. And reading this issue, I was remembering how we used to see Michael Golden at conventions all the time. And his wife, I think, or his girlfriend, was like his agent. What was her name?
I don't remember.
She was like a taller woman. I can vaguely picture her. I just remember seeing them like all the time. And like I could recognize her like immediately because she was like in charge of his whole, thing. And but now it's like, wow, that was 20 years ago or whatever, when we were going to all those cons, and it's like now they're like old, I guess, because they were probably in their 50s then, and now it's like, oh my god, they're in their 70s or whatever. Like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, is he even still? Some of them, I think we talked about this before, like, I see some Jerry Ordway artwork and I'm like, damn, he can still draw. Terry Moore can still draw. Walt Simonson still can draw.
Oh man, Simonson's Facebook page is a treasure trove, and he posts art like all the time. And yeah, it's just a little sketch I did of Aragorn or something, and it's like, oh my god, people would pay $1,000 for that right now.
Yeah, I'm not I don't know. If I come across like a Michael Golden comic, it's like, okay, that's a Michael Golden comic. But I don't follow, like, I haven't really followed his career, and I haven't followed, and yet he's so influential for a lot of artists.
Yeah, he sort of like flew under the radar for me. I didn't even know his name until met Buzz, right? Like, he just wasn't a name that I like thought of. I'm sure I read comics by him, or but he wasn't a name that I knew.
Right.
And then obviously I became aware of him, and I don't know that I ever really talked to him at conventions, but I just saw him a lot. I was always walking around. They don't have I was curious about his birthday, but they don't have it on Wikipedia. So I don't know how old he is. But he started working professionally in 1977. So like,
I can't be that old.
Even if he was, only 20 years old. Of course, some people got started when they were like 17, so who knows, right?
Yeah. Like, I was looking at, I don't know if you're following like George Perez and everything that's going on with his health and all that stuff, right? And I was looking at his first published works were like right out of high school. The guy was late teens, early 20s, just Puerto Rican in New York, just going into comics and quickly making a name for himself. Like, that's great. Like,
well, it's before I think it's really easy for us to forget that comics didn't used to be like big business. I mean, like, they were in the sense that, like, in the 30s or 40s, or then in the early 60s again, like, they sold a lot of comics, so they made a lot of money. Like, the publishers maybe made a lot of money selling shitty comic books to all the kids or whatever. But like, it wasn't like a serious industry where like serious artists, went to work. And so, yeah, they just flew by the seat of their pants. Like, people just hired whoever. Oh, you can draw, you can make a deadline. I don't care how old you are, just get it done, kid. Like, whatever. And because nobody like took it very seriously.
Right.
And now, like, when we started the podcast, like, once the 90s happened, like, comics were serious, big business, big, you only the best of the best, blah, 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 whatever. Right.
IP.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, things change, and we look at it now thinking about how everything must have been big business. And you're like, how do you hire, what's his face was 13 getting the right,
Jim Shooter.
Yeah, Jim Shooter is like how the hell, like that would never be possible today, because just signing the tax forms would be impossible, right? And get your
I love that story.
It's amazing.
That story is great too, because the editor calls him up and it's like, "Hey, we like the story. We want to fly you out. And he's like, "Okay." And he's like, "Wait a minute. How old are you?" And he's like, 13, 14. Goes, "Get your mom on the phone." And they had to talk to his mom and said, "This kid is sending us stories. You got it. All right, we're gonna." He's like, really, when you think about comic book prodigy, that feels like that's what that is, either through dumb luck or whatever, But that's just crazy. I love that story because the editor's like, "I'm here thinking I'm going to talk to some adult, and it's some kid, and we're ready to publish his book." And he really helped to define so much of the Legion history. It's no wonder he became Jim Shooter.
Right.
I love that story. That's so good. Yeah, we don't hear things like that again.
No, it can't. I mean, it can't happen. There's too much, legal stuff going on. You can't. All those things that we got away, like the fact that I was a paper boy. It's like you can't have paper boys. I was 12 years old.
Oh.
You can't hire people when they're 12 years old. That's totally illegal. Unless
Right.
you live on a farm in Idaho, and there's exceptions, right? Other than that, it's no way. And there's so much stuff that just. So yeah, they can't be hiring 13-year-olds to write comics.
Although they might be good. Remember that? What was the Axe Cop? Was that comic that the guy used to write with his younger brother? Yeah. It's ridiculous storylines, but they were kind of brilliant at the same time because they don't care. They're just writing stories.
Oh man, did you see that? In a couple weeks or 1 week or something, DMZ starts on HBO.
Oh yeah. As a callback.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Did you watch any of Y the Last Man?
No, because I was finally reading the trades, and then I was like, well, I'll get to it. And then it got canceled, and I was like, oh well, no rush now. I'll just, when I get to it, I'll get to it.
Yeah.
Did you see it? Was it?
We watched half of it and then found out that it was canceled. So then we sort of stopped caring to keep watching, because it was well, we know it's not going to end at season 1. So,
right.
And Tasha and I both read the whole series. So it was all right, I guess we're not watching it. Now if somebody else picks it up or something, then we'll go back to it. So that's.
Yeah. All those stories are, they were so written at a time where you just have to update a lot of that stuff, and especially with when I was reading some of the early trades of Y the Last Man, I was like, oh, some of this stuff's not going to fly. Jokes about periods and things like that. Times have changed. That's sort of outdated. At the time, it might have been, that is, but now it would be so much different. So even with DMZ, the whole character focus has changed with the main character, and I was like, it's all that Vertigo property stuff. There's a new Sandman coming out, right? And we know that that's being adapted too. And not that I need everything to be so literal, but they're totally different beasts. So part of me really just wants, I wanted Preacher to be Preacher, and it wasn't. It just, I don't know if you saw it, but it just wasn't.
I watched the first season, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, this is not Preacher. I wanted Preacher to be Preacher. So I feel that way a lot about those kind of things. The superhero stuff, for some reason, it doesn't bother me with the superhero stuff. But when it comes to
those very specific stories,
yeah, they said Sweet Tooth is very different from the books, and I'm like, what? How can you make Sweet Tooth different? First of all, how can you make the kid a good-looking kid? He's supposed to look he's supposed to look like a Jeff Lemire character. Jeff Lemire characters are haunting,
Right. Yes.
Deep set eyes. They're freaky looking. And they just got this cute kid with antlers on his head. And I was just like, that's not Sweet Tooth, So
right.
That kind of stuff bugs me a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm a stick in the mud, or Umbrella Academy is different than the books.
But that show is so good.
I haven't finished even the first season of it. But.
Oh, it's so good. I read the first miniseries that came out, but I didn't read the second, and I don't remember anything about it because you know me.
Sure.
But and so I can't speak as like a mega fan of the comics. I don't know how any of those people feel, but I feel like it's very likely that the show has like transcended the comic, and it doesn't make the comic less good, but I think the show is absolutely worthy of its own admiration and is a beautiful thing, even if it's completely different from the comic.
Right. Yeah.
It's just really, really, it's well acted. The everything looks interesting. Like it's very well done.
Yeah, I have a friend who is not into comics at all. Obviously, that's not a new thing to say anymore. But they love that show. Like they're like, how can you not? You're a comic. They say you're a comic book fan. You haven't seen it yet. Like it's so good. Like it makes you care about a friggin' monkey. Like
right? Yeah,
you have to watch this show. I'm like, I'll get to it. There's just so much. There's so much to watch. Like
what
Boys.
else is on your list?
I haven't seen Boys.
What?
I haven't seen
Peter.
I haven't seen Invincible yet.
Would you stop watching reruns of General Hospital and get on the Boys?
No, you know what I'm watching? I texted Shane the other week. I went back. I don't keep up on all the Star Wars stuff, right? And I was like, I don't know what. I think I read something that said, what's the best way to watch Star Wars? And one of the ways they listed, especially now that they have Mandalorian, Boba Fett, they just dropped the Obi-Wan trailer,
right?
Solo, Rogue Story, or whatever that one's called. Rogue One, yeah. And they were like, the best way to watch it is chronologically as the story develops. They're like, that was not the best way. They said that was one of the ways. And I was like, ooh, see, now that I know there's going to be contradictions because some things were created after, and you're really putting a jigsaw puzzle together like that. Fine. That's so I'm going to go in. So I started that, and I'm watching for the first time Clone Wars for the first time. And I, with Ahsoka Tano and, right. So it's still early. I'm still in the first season, but I have to watch all of that before I can go on to whatever's next, which is, I don't know if it's Revenge of the Sith or something else,
episode 3.
Yeah. And so now that makes me excited because I'm like, oh, cool. Now I'll be able to, where do all these other things fall? Where are they going to fall in? And they love to mine the Skywalker stuff, right? Like, or Tatooine or whatever. So I'm like, this is cool, and those early Clone Wars they're really just sort of kind of light and, they're just setting everything up.
We literally just finished season 1 like 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
And everyone says like the show basically sucks until you get to season 2.
Yeah.
Like it's a chore to get through season 1 of Clone Wars as an adult fan, right?
Yeah.
Even my kids are like, okay, like we just got to power through it, like, right. Get to the good stuff, right? So
it'll all swing back around again by the time you get to the later seasons, I imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, like so many shows, like the first season, it's like just about, telling some simple stories, and then when you find out that people care and they're watching, and then you get renewed, then you can start building an overarching story. So, right. You can finally get a chance. So you're watching Star Wars and I'm watching Star Trek, Peter. I started the Discovery. Is that the new one?
Yeah.
Discovery.
Yeah.
I'm like, 5 or 6 episodes into season 1, and I actually really like it. Like Jason Isaacs is awesome. The production value is actually finally like high enough for me to like accept watching it, and I don't feel like I'm watching a soap opera, with a $3 budget. I like it.
Yeah. That's funny.
And and Doug Jones, like the big tall alien dude, like he's a cool character, and
Michelle Yeoh, I mean they got
Yeah. So I'm enjoying it, and I did watch season 1 of Picard, and I haven't started season 2 yet. I know it like just came out last week, so I didn't watch the first episode yet. But
I wasn't big on season 1 of Picard. I really wanted to love it, and it's always great to see Picard and Data and the old Enterprise, but I really felt I I think season 2 will be more of what we want out of Picard. That first season, I was just like, when it got to the end, and I was like, what are they want to, there's this metal Cthulhu monster. Like, I was just like, no, the whole part of it, it just, and there were other people too I was talking to. I felt like they trying so hard to wrap up the Data story or something, and it just, and I think we were beyond that. Like, we were kind of like, they thought that that's what we wanted, and when we finally got to the end of Picard season 1, I was like, no, that's you could have had that as a side story, but because there were some other interesting things happening, like Picard and Seven meeting for the first time, two characters that were both Borgs, at some point or another. Like, that was, when you talk about cross continuity of characters meeting in the Star Trek universe, you could have done 4 episodes on that, and I would have jonesed on it, So I hope season 2's. Oh, and I also, as much as I like Alison Pill, I really did not like her character. She was the blonde, the blonde doctor. The one.
Oh, yeah.
I was just, by the end of it, I was like, no, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. Great in Newsroom and Scott Pilgrim, but in this I was like, I don't really care for it. That's interesting. You're watching Star Trek. Like reversing our roles.
Yeah. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with Star Trek, right? I mean, we've talked about this.
I know.
I like the original characters, I don't like the original series. It's unwatchable, but I like the original characters and some of the movies. And then like the new reboot, not reboot because it's like an alternate timeline universe thing. But like, I love those 3 movies, and I'm so excited that they're finally doing a 4th one now. And that's balls rolling. Like, I think it's beautiful and it's exciting, and the actors are great. And like, so I love the characters and the spirit of the whole thing. I just, I like my sci-fi to have a bigger budget. Star Trek has traditionally not had a bigger budget.
Yeah. And I also think as much as I like Discovery, and I've only seen the first season too. I was like, oh, see, again, like, you're trying to shoehorn a franchise in like the 5 minutes that you haven't explored between, episode 3 of season 3 of TOS and episode, you know what I mean? Like, they gotta, like Star Wars does the same thing. We're gonna mine not A New Hope, but the 10 minutes before New Hope, and now they're doing the Obi-Wan thing, and it's like, holy shit! Can we just go to a new era? And just like, I really thought that's what Discovery was going to be. And it wasn't. And that's okay, because it's still like the show still works. But I really would love, just like they did with Next Generation, you go 100 years in the future of that.
And just start telling new stories.
And then you give us a little bit of, connection here and there. Like, what will Star Wars be like after you get rid of the Skywalker thing? Like, that would be fun it's a huge galaxy.
Well, that's the one thing that like is a little irritating to me. So I love all the throwbacks and the connections and the little Easter eggs and stuff in all the Star Wars shows. Like, that's fun. Like, admittedly, It tickles all the right, 10-year-old, parts of my brain.
And that's what fandom wants now. They want all that stuff. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, they're going to Tatooine again. Like, aren't there like hundreds of planets? Like, how comes we've never seen, we've seen 6 of them. Where are the rest of these planets? like I don't know. Could you at least go to Bespin? Like, we've only been there like twice. Like, how many times have we been to Tatooine? Like, how is the entire Star Wars on either Coruscant or Tatooine? It's like, this makes no sense. Like, logistically, that's impossible, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So please, go someplace new. Give me a new world with new things and new aliens and whatever. Like, just even if it's just humans, just put them on a different planet, for God's sakes. I want to see some rocks and some water or something instead of just a desert all constantly. I think Favreau and Filoni are phenomenal, and they're doing a great job. And like, I'll take whatever they want to give me, and I'm not really complaining. And when we sit as a family and we watch the shows, we're all like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Even some of the like sort of stupid episodes of Boba Fett are still like new, exciting Star Wars. So like, I'm happy for it. But I am ready for something new. And I don't want it to go back in time. Like, I don't give a shit about the Old Republic, and like, please don't give me a Knights of the Old Republic TV show, because I just don't care. I'll watch it because it's Star Wars and I have to watch it. I don't care. I don't care about Jedis and Sith and all that. I just want to see spaceships and blasters and cool robots. Like, that's why I like Star Wars, so like, just go forward, go to some other planets and tell some stories.
Did you see you don't watch trailers, right? Did you see the Obi-Wan?
No, I haven't watched the Obi-Wan because I'm like, I don't want to watch. Right?
All right, then I won't say anything about that, because there's a point you're saying kind of like I could say something about, but of course it's Obi-Wan, so of course it's going to be smack dab in the middle of everything.
Well, sure,
we know.
And I, like as a fan, I'm certainly curious to know what happened between episode 3 and when you bump into him in episode 4. Like, right. I obviously I'd like to know, right? So I'm looking forward to that series, and I love that they got Ewan McGregor and they didn't just recast somebody else. Like, so it's really, the continuity is awesome, right?
Yeah. But the stakes aren't there, because it's not he can die.
He can't die, right? Like, okay, they can fill in some story bits, and that's cool, and I'll be very happy to like see that. But at the same time, it's like the money and the time they put into making that show, they could be making a brand new character that we all fall in love with, right? What if they made a new character that we loved as much as we love Boba Fett, or as much as we love Obi-Wan, or like Han Solo? Like, you could put your energy and resources into making that and give us the next 9 movies, right? Like, that's what I'm ready for. Is like, there can be the Force and there can be lightsabers. That's cool. That's part of Star Wars. Like, I'm fine with that, right? Like, I say I don't care about Jedi and Sith, but of course, like, if it's there, it's fine.
Right.
But maybe it doesn't have to be the focus, like the prime reason you're telling the story. And it definitely doesn't have to be Skywalkers. Like, it just create a new character. Now, do I want to see Finn and Poe? You bet your ass I want to see Finn and Poe. Like, of course, you could give me 6 movies with them, like buddy cop movies with those two flying around a galaxy doing stuff. Like, of course, like, who wouldn't go to see that, right? Like, absolutely. But then in that first movie, you introduced another character,
right?
And then that's now another character we get to fall in love with, right? Like, I mean, and I don't mean to exclude Rey. I'm just not mentioning Rey because she's so Force focused, like, and part of the Skywalker thing. So like, that's why I'm trying to steer the direction another way.
Right.
Of course, I care about Rey, and she's important for, the female strength and all the young ladies who are watching, the young girls who are like, they can identify. I think it's super important and great, and continues the strong tradition of Princess Leia and her badassery. So like, I love Rey, but I just, again, I'm sort of tired of the Force. I just want street level.
Well, because Star Wars is like you mentioned, it's conflict, right? It's good versus evil. So, but there are more stories you can tell than just good versus evil. Like, what if they use the Force because, I don't know, there's a galactic upheaval, or there's a big bad that's not a Force person, like that. So that maybe the Jedi and the Sith have to work together. I don't know. Like the true balance is that they work together, not that they're always at each other's throats. So yeah, it's stories come down to good versus evil, man versus himself, man versus there's only like a handful of stories you tell, but they're stuck on the one of it's the same. Why? Maybe it was because of the time. Maybe it was because of the 80s, and we were starved for any sci-fi property. When was Return of the Jedi? That was
83.
84. Okay. So when Star Trek Next Generation hits, and look, that first season wasn't everybody's favorite, but for some reason it lasted 7 seasons and worked and spawned movies, and spawned other shows, and as kind of a, most people don't like Voyager, but at least they tried to do something different. They got away from Klingons because they got away from Romulans because they were on a whole other quadrant of the universe, right? So they had to come up with new stuff. And then eventually what did they do? They brought the Borg in because they needed to, get ratings or whatever. But at least they did it, and it worked, so it makes me wonder, why are they so hesitant? Do you watch Cobra Kai?
I watched the first 2 seasons. I mean to continue. I just, like you said, there's too much to watch.
Right. That's everything that we're talking about. They're continuing the legacy, right? It's still Daniel versus Johnny, but there's a whole other group of people that you can hate and you can love.
Yes.
Hawk and Miguel and Tori or whatever I forget what her name is. I think it's Tori. I love that show. I mean, first of all, it's Karate Kid. I do. You should see me. I get my jaw drops. I tear up when certain things. Like, I am in it. I love Cobra Kai. Love it, love it, love it. There are times on YouTube where I'll just watch all the big fights from the old movies.
Yeah.
And connect it to the stuff now and go, oh my God, it's like the same choreography and, all the stuff happens. I love it. I fucking love it. But to me, I feel like Battlestar Galactica and Cobra Kai got it right because they still toy with what but it's a whole, and Star Trek Next Generation. So like Discovery, the Star Wars stuff, I don't know what other franchises out there that they mine. Whenever they go backwards, I'm like, stop going backwards. It's like if we would get Lost again, and instead of making like a new Lost, they would just try to weave a story in the stuff we know. It's like, no, we don't want that. Like,
right. We want you to tell Lost, but tell it correctly this time.
Oh shit. Don't get started on it.
No, like legitimately, like I, because there's always rumors that they're going to remake Lost, and
really,
I hope. Oh yeah, it's always.
Oh,
and
God.
I hope they remake it, and I hope that they actually like plot it out before they start filming the first episode and be like, we have a 5-season arc, and the smoke monster connects to this, and this is this, and the reason that this happens is this, and then they unveil it over time, and we're surprised and like wowed when we go, oh, that's why that switch was on the wall, because Lost was kind of like Mist. The game Mist, remember the video game?
Oh yeah,
where
I
like
love that game.
You would walk in and you like flip a switch and nothing happens, and you're like, and it's only like 8 hours of gameplay later that you find out that switch trips the light in the other building 6 islands over, or whatever. That's kind of how Lost started, where it was like all this mystery, and then they just sort of forgot all the mystery and just told this random story that they decided they want to tell in season 4, and you're like, what the hell? What? You never closed the door,
But would you want it to be the same characters again, or do you want it like, I don't know, the next Lost? Like that. How would you want that to play
it doesn't. I want it. I want the same concept. Airplane can crash on a mysterious island, and weird things are happening, and like there can be a hatch, and there can be a computer with the beeping thing, but I just want them to connect all the dots and have it not just be purgatory. Like I want it to be a concrete, real, like scientific thing.
Yeah.
That's what I want. And it could be new characters, and it can be like the whole scenario can be slightly different. It doesn't have to be all exactly the same or whatever. Like, but they could have a thing called the Dharma Initiative, and there could be a hatch, and then shit happens. And because I want to be surprised. Like, I don't want to just be like, oh, and if it was Locke again, the same Locke, but it was a different actor, we'd be like, oh man, the original Locke was better. Like, really, it could just be like the Locke show. Like, that's really, the reason you watch Lost by the end.
I feel like if they would make a Lost show, they would want to make it like the development of the Dharma Initiative. They would want to go back in time, Yeah,
they can't. I want like just a reboot of the same concept, just actually well told. Because when you talk about something being generational, it's like that show now, like there are 21-year-olds who, have never seen Lost because it was on when they were a tiny little kid, and they don't even know what it is. So if Netflix launched Lost, a year from now, millions of people would be like, ooh, what's this? They would have no idea that there was an old show called Lost.
Yeah. I'm telling you.
Who the hell's watching Lost?
They gotta, I don't know how you can watch Cobra Kai and not want to replicate that formula. I mean, I just think it nails exactly what I want out of nostalgia TV, because that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
I don't want a reboot. I don't want a reboot of what we know. I want a continuation, whether it's more in the future, like Star Trek Next Generation, or it's some generations ahead, like, I feel like that to me is the sweet spot that, it's like, did you see West Side Story? Did you see West Side Story yet?
No.
Do you have any interest in that? No. I mean,
I never saw the original. Like,
okay.
I just, it's song and dance thing. What the hell do I care?
Yeah, but it's Spielberg though. It's cool to watch, like, the way
Spielberg did the new one. I had no idea.
Yeah,
because I just ignored everything about it because I don't care. Yeah.
I mean, it was interesting to see, because I remember him talking about it in an interview. He was like, I want to explore how it is to film a musical. Like, what do you do? So in a way, it's like he's done everything, right? He's done science fiction, he's done thriller, he's done horror. Has he done horror? I mean,
not really. The Duel was pseudo horror-ish.
Okay.
It was scary.
Period pieces, So has he done a musical that's straight up a musical, not just like that has musical elements in it? And he was talking about, ways of filming it. And there's behind the scenes of him like on the floor doing all this stuff, like with the big dance at the gym. So that's cool, because there were really great shots of like major depth, as like, if you have these two lines of dancers coming together, it's not just like 8, it's like 20 deep. And he has to show that depth and overhead shots of dancers and really capturing as he does, bodies in the frame. I mean, he's a master at it, right? Like,
right.
I'm not breaking new ground by saying this. Even stupid shit like when you have two people singing, they don't need to be center. They can be off to the side, because you're giving them something to look at, right? If they're over here, they're looking at what's this way. So that's how you want to film it, because it's not just that you're looking at them, you're looking at whatever it is they're singing about, or the idea of whatever. Like, he was smart about a lot of that stuff. Obviously, it's Steven Spielberg, right? But there's a funny thing in it that I think is funny, because Rita Moreno, who was in the original, you know who Rita Moreno is, right? The Hey You Guys from she was in the original as Maria's friend Anita. Now she's playing an older woman character, but has scenes with the character that she used to play in the old movie, right? So now I'm starting to go, wow, it's almost like she got stuck in this like weird time loop, and now she is reliving the story, and she's now the older version of herself, and her younger, like, this whole cinematic universe thing. In my mind, there's a West Side Story cinematic universe that's divided by 60 years, and it's amazing. Right. And like, she's stuck in this limbo of like, I have to relive this story over and over again. Meanwhile, the city is tearing down, like the world is breaking down around. It's fabulous. I love it. I want somebody to develop that further and just keep doing that. Like, find movies and then find the one old actor that's still alive, totally reboot it. But it's just like them stuck in a cycle. I think that'd be great. No.
What was I going to say? Were the song and dance numbers better than the opening scene of Temple of Doom? Because that's when he filmed a musical.
Oh yeah, Anything Goes.
Yeah. There was a whole lot of dancers and all this stuff, and they had steps and the whole thing, right?
And then they did the whole shootout, right? The whole shootout thing that was going on. Yeah, and that was meant to be cheesy, right? Because she wasn't meant to be good at
right,
all that singing and dancing. Yeah, I forgot about that. I'll have to go back and watch that. Yeah, I'll have to see what that's like. That's funny. We should talk about Dune before we wrap up. Sure. I know, because you caused quite a stir on Facebook, as you do.
I just say what I think.
Well, what did you think, for people who didn't see?
So I described, and I've spoken, I've talked about this at length to people in person. Is I think the new Dune movie was the most beautiful boring movie I've ever seen. And I mean that sincerely. It's not necessarily a criticism. I mean, it certainly sounds like it, but like the movie is absolutely stunning. Like every scene is gorgeous, beautiful, like well lit and filmed, and the sets and like everything is just impressive, right? But like at no point in that movie did I care. Like that's not true. When Jason Momoa's character dies, I'm like, no, why didn't they just shut the door and he go with them? Like it made it like upset me because he didn't really buy them in much time at all by like sacrificing himself. It was sort of stupid. And I liked his character. He was the only one I cared about. But like, even when the giant worms are like trying to attack him at like the end, like one of the big final scenes, like there's no sense of like urgency. You're sort of just going, oh, I'm just watching this thing. I don't really feel invested in it. And I watched it with the girls. And when it was over, I said exactly that to them. I said, this is the most beautiful, boring movie I've ever seen. And they were like, yeah, we know exactly. Like they got what I meant. Like they also were like glued to the image because it was pretty, but didn't care. Like we were like, if part 2 was ready to watch right now, would we watch it right now? And we were all just like, yeah, who cares?
Yeah.
So I get that, like for people, I never read the book, so I have nothing invested in it. Of course, I saw the original movie, but so I don't have a deep connection to the characters or anything. So I don't know, like, did it match the book? From everything that I've read, it was everything that like super fans of the book have always wanted. Like they've been waiting for 40 years to see this movie, right? So like I appreciate that for them. Like it's a monumental achievement, right? But for me, it just didn't trigger an emotional response.
Yeah. I'm not a super fan of the movies, but I've had the book since the late 80s, maybe early 90s. I've had the first 2, and I just bought the third one last year. And it's the kind of science fiction I like because it's reading, right? Because it's about for me, it's about the connections of these new people who live differently and think differently. So you have to get to know what the conflicts are and why they do what they do. And then on top of that, there's just for shorthand, it has an element of the Force in it, right? Like the Bene Gesserit, the whole speaking thing. I mean, it's like, it's got the mysticism behind it that you love in science fiction, and prophecy, big giant worms, which are just, big giant dragons, like it's got everything you love, right? Like, or everything that you want to see, right? So I read the books, and one of my favorite scenes in the books is from the first movie, is just a conversation around a dinner table between some of the royalties, right? Because I love it's like all the good scenes in Game of Thrones where it was just like people talking, like, but they're so smart in the way they talk, right? And you love it because you love how they make digs, and you're trying to really figure out what I love shit like that. So anyway, so I like the books. Not a super fan, but I like the books. They're right in sort of my wheelhouse of what sci-fi is. And then I saw this new movie, and I was like, this is too straightforward. It's too. There were parts of it where I was like, are they on an alien planet, or are they just in somebody's backyard? First of all, the way they talk, and Jason Momoa, unfortunately, really was the one that made this. He turned to oh my God, the main character's name, I totally skipped my head. Timothy Chalamet. Turned to him and was like, "You good?" And then was like, "Yeah, I'm good." And I was like, "Wait, you good is not science fiction language,
right? It's way too Earth." Yeah,
yeah, to your point about the boring thing of it, like I sat there and was like, I'm just watching a movie I'm watching a movie unfold, but people want to argue or people want to make fun of the David Lynch movie. At least there were like elements to it that made it worthwhile, made it feel alien. You heard the characters' thoughts in their heads. The Harkonnen guy was big, fat, floating around, laughing his ass off. They had weird navigational creatures in swimming in whatever, in gunk, like there was oddity and weirdness to it. This movie was so straightforward that I was like, I feel the same way. I was bored. I was like, there's no Dune in Dune. It's Dune as backdrop. It's Dune as plot A to plot B to plot C. Where's the thing that makes it Dune-y? Like I was even the worms. I was like, I've seen worms. Beetlejuice had worms, snakes, whatever. Like I don't know what I wanted, but it wasn't that. So I got to the end of it and I was like, I don't think I could watch that again. Like I remember watching.
Oh yeah, no way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we talked about this before. I don't know if we did, but I remember watching Interstellar for the first time, and I was just blown away by just you got to do what? You're on a planet, and every tick is 7 years. Oh my God, that's fascinating. Like, there was weirdness to it. It's space, right? And Dune, like so they put those shields on, and they fight, and they try to stab each other. Like, David Lynch already did it. He did it in the 80s. The technology is so much better, and yet it didn't feel any different or better than what I saw in the 80s. So it's like, you didn't give me any in that. So I had to agree with you. I was like, I don't know how people who didn't read the book can watch this and really get the nuances of what's going on with like the Bene Gesserit stuff and give me that trippy David Lynch was right. Like, I think he was right, even though he did crazy stuff with the movie. You had to do something with it, with the prophecies and all that. So I'm kind of with you, and I like Dune. So, and I actually am one of those that I don't care about. I don't need to see movies like I need to go see it in a movie theater. I don't care. Whatever. I got a big screen. Okay, that's fine. That's it's good enough for me. I'll sit really close to it. It'll make it seem like big. I don't need. For me, it's not necessarily the cinematography. Are you just capturing my interest because you're trying to do things with it? And I don't think Dune did things. So,
yeah, it was like missing the spirit.
Yeah,
and it just
I do. I think that. Yeah, that's like if you watched the Star Wars or Star Trek and they didn't do anything that made them Star Wars or Star Trek, you'd be like, what the F? Like, no, nobody teleports anywhere. Nobody's right. There's not a spaceship in sight. Like, what? Even Harkonnen, like, I like the guy who plays the new Harkonnen, the Peter, whatever his name. I forget what his name is. I don't know if it's Peter or not. Very low. They really like made that character low key. He was villainous, but you compare him to the David Lynch one, where he was like a hyped up balloon just blowing around everywhere. Mm-hmm. I was like, maybe something in the middle might have been better. So I agree. I was just like, when you posted it, I was like, I'm not going to say anything because I agree with it. Like, I'll let you take the heat.
But I've talked to other people who, sort of agree. Not I don't need everybody to agree, and I'm happy if people love it, and if it scratched the itch that they've been having for a long time. That's awesome, right?
Right.
I was looking forward to seeing it because it's this sort of what's the word? I don't know. Not quite legendary. I want something. There's a different word out there that I want, but infamous, I think, is the appropriate word for Dune, where it's like people love the book, people hate the book. People love the first movie, people hate the first movie. Like, there's all this stuff. And I was like, okay, maybe this will be the chance for me to like get into the Duneverse, right? And I'll be like, okay, I get it now, right? And I still did. And our friends of ours, their 15-year-old is on the third book right now. He's almost finished. And he said, the first book is great. The second two, just skip them. Just throw them right out. You don't even need to read them. Read the first book, enjoy it. And then that's all Dune should have ever been, is just the first book, from a 15-year-old. So, and, at this point, I feel like reading the book won't be fun because I know, even though the movies are different, but I'll still know like the gist of what's happening, and like I don't like spoilers, so like I'll just be like, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I don't think there's. I mean, the beats are there. It's not totally different. The beats are there, and there's some stuff you would get, but the book is also slow. The first book is slow, but it's told in a way that gives you much more imagery in your mind and much more imagination than the movie does, where the movie's just too literal, I think, with what it's trying to do. It's just, no. And I love science fiction, so I want a new franchise to take off. I have to go back and rewatch the sci-fi Dune. Dune was on sci-fi for like a mini series. I think it was what's his face from he played the new Professor X in the X-Men movies.
Oh, really?
McAvoy, right?
James McAvoy. Yeah,
right. I think he either played Paul, the main character, or he played the son, or I can't remember. Anyway, I remember watching that at the time. Now, obviously, it's been a bunch of years, but I remember thinking, "Oh, this is much closer to the book than the 80s movie. It was much closer." So now I kind of want to go back and see, does it hit the same points? Oh no, it wasn't. It was Alec Newman. William Hurt was in it. I thought James McAvoy was in it as the son, maybe. So anyway, yeah, I want a new sci-fi franchise, and I want to see.
I know. Something. I feel the same way. I read. Well, I'm 2 books behind now, but I've mostly caught up on the Expanse novels. Like I started reading them when the first book came out, and I loved them. So I never I watched the first season of the show. I'm like, that's fine, but like I've read all the books, so like again, like there wasn't as much to like care about because I already knew what was happening. And quite frankly, I thought the show was very confusing. I'm like, I know exactly what's going on because I read the books, and I can't tell what's going on half the time in the show. I'm like, how does anyone who hasn't read the books have any idea what's happening on that show? I don't get it. So I never like bought into, I know a lot of people love it, and they're like, that's the next big science fiction franchise for a lot of people, but it's over now. Like they've wrapped, right? But yeah, I want something grander, something that can evolve into, a Star Wars or a Star Trek, right? Like, yeah, it's a tall order, right? You got to create a whole universe and a whole thing. I don't know. It's a lot. There's so much fantasy that hasn't been filmed yet that could be filmed. Like so many book series that are really, really good. But the sci-fi is I always feel like that's like many steps behind the fan. I think it's easy to create fantasy worlds because it doesn't have to be real, but sci-fi has to be like, I mean, obviously none of the physics in Star Wars or Star Trek work at all, but there's still like an element of realness. Like space is still dangerous. Like you can't just go out into space and, like all this. Like,
right.
Whereas fantasy, it's like you can kind of do whatever you want. And so people write fantasy stories a dime a dozen, and they're good. Yeah. But sci-fi is harder, I think.
Yeah. And I think they really shot their load because, when they were doing Hunger Games, they were also doing like Divergent and all the other, like they kept trying to do the young reader fiction stuff, dystopia stuff. And like, that's burned out,
Yeah.
And then it's like, where do you go next? What's the next big thing that's going to make the resurgence? And, superhero movies are so popular. Like what's going to be the next thing? And I don't know, it's got to be the thing that's, maybe not attached to anything and maybe just comes out of nowhere and has no big names to it, and is just this whole new property that everybody goes, whoa, this is amazing. And it's so hard to do because studio heads want the next big thing. They want the sure thing, I should say. Did we talk about Lord of the Rings, the Amazon thing? Or you talk about another series going backwards, right? Like,
I'm so nervous. So I didn't watch the trailer again because of course I'm going to watch it. It's Lord of the Rings. Right?
Sure.
But oh my God, Wheel of Time was so bad.
Same creators
on Amazon. Well, it was Amazon, right? It's not the same creators.
I see what you're saying.
Amazon produced and delivered the Wheel of Time, and it was like almost unwatchable. Like it's really not good. And I believe that the Lord of the Rings, budget and stuff is way, way bigger, but they were like really trying to sell Wheel of Time. I think they were hoping that Wheel of Time would have been like the next Game of Thrones. And it was like, no, good try. It's not going to happen. And now I'm just like, oh God, like what are they doing here? Like, is it, it better be good. But man, I would not be surprised if it's lousy. Don't get me wrong. I want it to be good and I'm not judging it until it comes out. Right. Cause I'm not going to be that guy, but I'm so nervous that they're going to just shit all over, the greatest fantasy property that's ever been conceived by mankind. I don't want, those Hobbit movies were already a disgrace. Like the good bits were great, but the bad bits were so what in the hell? How many drugs did Peter Jackson do to where did those orcs come from? There's no goddamn orcs. Get them out of there. Right. I don't understand.
It was a video game come to life.
Oh my God. It was ridiculous. So it's already we're 50-50 on Lord of the Rings properties.
Yeah.
And now they're introducing a third thing. And what are the odds? Right. I don't know. So hopefully it'll be awesome. And hopefully, a year from now, we'll be like, holy shit, that's redefined television. Great. I hope that we have that conversation.
Right. Right. Did you watch Lost in Space on Netflix?
I watched the first season.
Okay.
And I liked it, but I've heard that season 2 is quite good, but I just, again, there's just so Netflix does such a bad job of reminding you to watch stuff that you started watching that once it's gone from the 6 things that says continue watching, you forget it ever existed. And then you're on to something else.
I wondered if maybe there was an attraction for your girls because the one character writes. It's not a main plot, but she writes about their story. She is a writer, and like I said, it's not developed hugely, but there's that connection. I really like that show. I'm a huge Parker Posey fan. Mm-hmm. I love Parker. That is a masterclass of acting. What she does on that show, the way she manipulates people.
Oh my God,
is her choices. I could do a whole podcast just on Parker Posey scenes in Lost in Space and just tell actors, see, that's acting, But anyway, the woman who plays the mother is gorgeous.
My God, I know. I have such a crush.
Yes, I do. And it's funny. And it's also, the other thing I like about it, and I always try to push it for younger people too, is there's an educational aspect to it. I feel like they are trying to say, here is real world science, even though we are science fiction, the mother is constantly talking about, whatever. So problem solving. And there are some really emotional moments that I find I get very emotional. I guess I've always been emotional, but as I get older, I get even more emotional. So I do love that show. I'm sad that I watched all of it. I think I've seen season 1 at least 4 times because I keep going back and rewatching for season 2. And then I went back for season 3. Such a good show. But I think if people out there, if they have younger people into it or who watch shows like that, they should definitely watch Lost in Space, and don't I try to tell people, don't look at it like it's the next Star Wars or anything like that. Like, it's just a family show. Like, here's a show you can watch with family, and it's got robots and spaceships and battles and, and funny romantic moments for the adults and silly situations for the kids and a chicken. And it's just, there's funny stuff in it. Like, I loved that show. God, I could watch that over and over. So,
hey, speaking of like good sci-fi, there's no TV, it's just a book, but have you heard of or read Red Mars?
No.
So it's hard sci-fi, so it's like realistic. It's like theoretically this could happen, and it's about humanity sending a colonization ship to Mars. And then there's 3 books in the trilogy: Red Mars, Green Mars, and Blue Mars. And I highly recommend it.
Okay.
It's by Kim Stanley Robinson, and absolutely worth your time to read it.
You talked about the Leviathan books the first time we got together, and I have it on I just haven't bought a copy, but I have that because like I said, I'm trying to finish Dune before I go into anything else. I can only read one thing at a time. I know, like, other people can read.
Oh, I read like 3 or 4 books at a time.
I can't do that. I can do it with comics. I can't do it with novels. I have to get like one, or I get distracted. But so I'll put this on the list. I'll definitely put this on the list.
Yeah, I think you would like it.
Cool. All right. Well, I think, do you want to, I guess we should kind of also give a shout out to Jim Dietz, right?
Yeah.
Who passed away. For those people who don't know, Jim Dietz was someone we met out from Pittsburgh, right? Like that huge Pittsburgh crew that, or people who were from Pittsburgh, but then we also met a lot of people who were like from Jersey, but Pittsburgh seemed to be like a focus point for us. Like, we met a lot of people.
It was a cool con, yeah.
It was a cool con, yeah. And Jim Dietz, he went by Yoda Jones on the old forums, and ran the Gypsy Cafe and invited us out. I think, was that 2000? I didn't look it up. It was either 2006 or probably had to be 2000.
Yeah, it was probably that first year. Yeah, it was probably that. And he did it a couple times. I think we did it twice, maybe 3 times. I can't remember.
Yeah, because there was the one year like Mario took us out for Permani Brothers. And then there was the Gypsy Cafe meetup. And it might have been the first big con season that we went on. But Jim Dietz passed away a couple days ago, unfortunately. And everybody, they finally released it on publicly too, that he passed. So for anybody,
it sucks.
Yeah,
he was a really good guy. He was super friendly, and what I really loved about Jim was he just was absolutely unapologetic for his love of like everything nerdy, comics and video games and D&D, and like he just did not care what anybody thought. Like, he just was into what he was into, and he was happy to be into it, and he was happy to talk to other people about it. And like, it was so cool because he was older than us, and so like I know what it was like when I was growing up as a kid, and he was I think he's like 7 or 8 years older than me, so like things were like even more crazy like in 1980 when he was like, so like he just was real, you know. Like, I had no mask, right? He just was who he was. And I mean, he was super nice.
He opened up his business to us at that time. He was like, I have this Gypsy Cafe, come on out, we'll do the meetup there in Pittsburgh. And it was like, wow, that was cool.
And then he started those geek brunches that he would do every Sunday. And then, and then that started a whole tradition, and he got to know a lot of great people and made other nerds feel welcome. They had a place to go. And I think, Dave Wachter would go to that all the time. And I think Ed Piscor, knew Jim, and they had a relationship, and it's just like, he was a magnet for, brethren, right? And it really, really sucks.
Someone emailed me a couple weeks back, and they were saying how you know, being in comics, we were fortunate. I think in many ways we were probably, it was rare to have a comic book community like we did at Golden Eagle, where you could just hang out for hours and not just have friendship in the store, but friendship out of the store too, which I'm sure there's a lot of comic people, stores where people come in, you hang out, but then you go. And comics can be very isolating, and you could sort of think you're the only one in comics, so you don't want to be embarrassed because you don't want your coworkers to know or whatever. So someone emailed me and they were like saying how, it wasn't, and we've heard this story many times. It wasn't until CGS where they were like, oh my God, there's a community out there, and the fostering of that community was why they then fully absorbed their geekdom, right? And I feel like Jim is one of those people, right? Like whatever that time was that, I'm thankful that Twitter wasn't big and Facebook wasn't big, because the community, you know what I mean? Like all the social media stuff has kind of spread people back out again, and they want to be their own sort of personal whatever. But like people like Jim, like because we went out to Pittsburgh and other places, suddenly pockets started to get created wherever they were, like CGS UK and CGS Australia, and the people in Pittsburgh and people that didn't know they lived in the same community, and suddenly they're meeting up. Like that was something that I thought was cool about that, what Jim did. So,
Oh yeah. And then he was involved in multiple podcasts of his own, and then encouraged more geekery from thousands of other people too. And he was really a good proselytizer for being yourself and enjoying the things that you enjoy and not worrying about it. Right? I think that I just admire that so much.
And it's a good message, right? Like I think we always try to say that too. Like don't get bogged down in the stuff you don't like. Like why? Like you said, like I just want comfort stuff. Like I don't want to hate watch, and I don't want to. Yeah. I just want to watch. I just want to enjoy. Like that's probably the reason why I am so backed up on things, because I just went back to. I started rewatching Riverdale again, like from the beginning, because I love it, So it's like I want something I love. I don't want to be disappointed in things anymore. So whatever.
Yes, you don't have to read every issue of Avengers ever. You can stop buying it. Like, whatever series you buy because you feel obligated, and then you realize you have 50 issues you haven't read. It's like just stop. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, or there's like you said, go backwards. I have not, this whole thing with George Perez. I have not read every George Perez book. I'm discovering new pictures I've never seen, new covers I haven't seen, short stories, and I'm like, oh my God, and I'm supposedly a big George Perez fan. Well, maybe now it's time to put that to the test, and go back and enjoy the thing that gives me joy,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, I have an idea for if you want, whenever we want to get back together again.
Yeah, tell me.
Should we go back and dip into more Thor?
Sure.
Like bounce back and forth, like a generic episode, and then go back to Thor.
I got that big omnibus. I need an excuse to keep reading.
You need to read it, and I have issues that I need to read. Like I think I have it. Like I think if we read the next 10 from where we left off, that'll put us right at the start of Frog Thor. But
okay, yeah,
but not
Frog of Thunder.
Frog of Thunder, yeah, because it still is playing with stuff we read, and I thought, well, as I was looking at, and there's a whole big thing with like Hela, and I was like, ooh, that looks cool. And then I found an issue, and I was like, okay, here's where it's like a weird Secret Wars 2 issue. I'm like, okay, that feels like a good, let's read that as the last one, and then we'll get into like Frog of Thunder. That'd be awesome.
Nice.
So yeah, I think we should do that. That way it's easy enough. We don't have to search. We can just read it, and it's something we can focus on, and then get back to reading Thor. So
cool. Yeah, I'll put it on my desk so that I have like I don't suddenly go, oh my God, I have to read 10 issues in 2 days, because those babies are meaty. You can't read those quickly.
Yeah. I'll send you what those issues are. I think it goes up to 363. So, and there might be an annual, but I don't think Simonson's in the annual. There's also that Balder miniseries, but I don't know where that falls in with the stories. So I'll have to research that.
Oh, went to the comic shop here, Showcase Comics in Bryn Mawr, a couple weeks ago, and I finally got the first trade of the Usagi Yojimbo color stuff. And man, like there have been, a few miniseries over the years or one shots that were in color, but it is really nice seeing this beautiful colored comics, man. It's so nice. And of course it's Tom Luth on colors, the guy who did all the Gru, because Stan did all the lettering on Gru. Right. So like they've worked together for 40 years or whatever. And it's really nice. Not quite 40, but close enough.
Close enough. I mean,
86 or 84 or something. 84, I think, when Gru started. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm celebrating 40 years of reading comics at the end of. Is it at the end? I think it's at the end of this year. In October of 2022 will be 40 years exactly that I bought my first comic. Not that somebody gave me. That I went and bought off the rack myself.
When you received the St. Francis of Assisi comic for your communion or whatever,
Yeah, because I got those farmer market comics from my uncle. With it was all like Bronze Age Marvel and DC and like covers torn off and But I was reading Richie Rich at the time. That's really what I was reading. And then when I bought my own first superheroes from money that I probably stole or whatever, it was October of 1982. I figured it out and I was like, oh my God, I'm going on 40 years of reading comics. That's amazing.
Isn't it crazy?
I know. I mean, we're pushing 50, so.
Oh, no. Don't remind me. Well, you're closer than I am, so.
I'm ignoring it.
Oh, God.
I felt it, though. I did a reorganization of my comics. I'm on spring break right now, so in the past, 2 days. Oh, my God. My knees were by the end of day one, they were like, I thought we weren't going to do this again. When I moved, the last time I moved my 30 some boxes, 30 plus, it destroyed my knees, really, and I can't be messing with that. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't do this ever again. I wasn't even moving. I was just, putting them on the floor and then putting them back and rearranging them. I wasn't even going up flights of steps. So my body was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're not moving, are you? I'm like, no, I'm not moving. I can't do that anymore. That's crazy. Yeah. So, okay.
All right. Maybe next time I can actually, I will have seen Spider-Man by then. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because it comes out on video on the 22nd. So I got cool. 2 weeks, before I can watch it.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll do that. We'll time it so that you'll see and then we'll come in after. Because you won't get to see Batman for a while, probably.
Whenever it comes. Although I didn't read the article, but Julian just posted. I think it was Julian just posted some link that HBO might get that out pretty quickly. Warner Brothers might make this really short window for the theater, and then because I think a lot of people are still in pandemic mode and not going to the theater. So like me, I'm not in no hurry to go back to the theater. So yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, we'll time it out. We'll time it out for the Spider-Man talk, because then I'll be anxious for your thoughts on that. So.
Cool. And then we can talk about the Moon Knight series and have Kevin join us.
Oh boy. I talked to Kevin recently.
Yeah.
He already had things to say about that.
Oh my God.
Just from the trailer. I think just from the trailer there were at least 4 F-bombs that happened in this conversation in a matter of 30 seconds. I was like, oh my God. So I quickly moved off that conversation.
Now I want to do a weekly, podcast with Kevin, just ripping to shreds the Moonlight show. I don't know. I'm sure I'll love the show, but I kind of want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah. We're not invested in that character, right?
Exactly.
That has been a torch he's been carrying for.
Then we can tell him how much we love it, and then he can just watch him get red in the face.
That would be funny.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, man.
Talk to you next time.